from the CyberHub bunker and studio. You're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast, Tech Corner. And now, join me in welcoming your host and CISO, James Azar.
Folks, welcome to another Tech Corner here, part of our RSA special series. Joining me, Steve Shalita. He's the VP of Marketing and Business Development for Pluribus Networks. Steve, thank you for joining the program today.
Hi, James. Thanks for having us. Happy to be here.
Brilliant. Awesome. So, folks, before I get started with Steve, though, just a few housekeeping things to keep in mind. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you. We appreciate you taking time to tune into the show. Please make sure to subscribe and follow, see all of the other great content we have on the channel. Also, check out Pluribus Networks. You'll see more about them in the show notes below, so you can go and check out some of the great stuff they're doing. We've got an awesome packed 20 minutes for you here. So let's get right into it with Steve. Steve, I want to talk to you a little bit about open networking. And why is open networking so important within a cybersecurity organization?
Well, open networking is important overall from an IT and a security perspective because it changes the dynamics of how people acquire their technology. Open compute and that type of scenario has been around for some time, and we're starting to really see growth around the concept of open networking in the network and security side. What this does is changes the dynamics of the technology purchase model, if you will. Instead of focusing on vertically integrated solutions where the vendor's providing the hardware and the software components in a single environment, you're able to put together the pieces using lower cost common hardware and focusing on the software and the technology that's going to make the most relevant difference to your requirements. So essentially the software becomes the critical factor, right? At a hardware level, we need base level of functionality to be able to perform and deliver the kind of functionalities that you need. In the networking realm, in today's world, the baseline of silicon that comes from someone like a Broadcom, merchant silicon, is being used widely across your top tier vendors. What the open networking vendors do is allow you to use a standard network hardware base and really focus on their differentiation and their capabilities on the software side. So you translate this into the security realm and specialized requirements that you have to be able to support different needs. This gives you much more flexibility to focus on finding the technology that's going to give you the capabilities that are really software-based, software-defined, and more evolutionary in nature and not dependent upon the underlying hardware.
Yeah, so that's a great point. You look at kind of like, open networking as a whole, though. How widespread do you think adoption of open networking is, considering the fact, we're in the hybrid model of, working from home, a lot of, as we're at the end of this and there's kind of going back to normal. And what I mean by going back to normal is things are opening back up again. I think we're all going to be in person at Black Hat at some point, right? Even though RSA is virtual, this is going to be, kind of one of those things where it's for the books, and, we'll reflect on this 10 years down the road and go, ha, remember that one time we did this all in a computer and not in person. But it also brings kind of the idea that traditional networking is gone, right? I mean, the last year has kind of shown us that the traditional idea of a network, within the confines of a digital, if not a digital, but a physical address within a building is no longer the norm, that everything is kind of now being spread out across various IPs and different infrastructures, and people are working from home. How do you start to apply open networking capabilities or open networking rules to kind of this new hybrid model?
Well, it really applies into the infrastructure that supports everything that you've defined, right? As the world opens up and there is no defined place, although that changes in some cases, some will come back. You still have data centers, but data centers have expanded out and moved into the cloud. But there still needs to be something to run these environments. And where open networking has the play is the alternative to the traditional networking hardware. Just think of building it different. It's a cost equation because it does reduce costs to remove the cost burden of vertically integrated solutions, but it really is about increasing flexibility. So if you put it in the context of adoption, it has been a slow and steady adoption. There is a number of factors of moving from a traditional infrastructure environment, and I use just as an example a Cisco or a Juniper, where you go in and buy hardware and software from them, and it's all one system, as opposed to going to this disaggregated model. That's a slower road to make those adoptions, whether it be through refresh and upgrade cycles, but also corporate strategies and just change factors. But if you go look at hyperscalers and some of your cloud operators and cloud services, they've moved into the disaggregated model a long time ago. And they're full bore in most of their deployments, where they're leveraging disaggregation and more of a software-defined infrastructure. So it's an evolutionary model. The key is for a customer to adopt open networking is there cannot be a functional difference. In fact, it's not just about the cost savings. It really is about the functional improvements or the incremental capabilities that you can get. And that's what we've focused on at Pluribus. Open networking is a vehicle. It's a way to deliver that. In fact, we deliver a turnkey open networking solution to our customers. What does that mean? It's an open networking hardware platform that runs any software, but we deliver it in a tier one model, like a Cisco or a Juniper would, so the customer doesn't have to do this integration. And so that removes that complexity or that concern, and we just focus on the functionality or the capabilities that we can bring to their networked environment. As it goes more remote and distributed, you still need network infrastructure, but where the biggest change is going to be is in that campus infrastructure, the part of the network that's delivering connectivity to users and different functions. And it's also going to change the security landscape.
So you bring up, I think, what's a very interesting point when you talk about that. We also look at network segmentation, right? So network segmentation is now a very big deal. Why is open networking a compelling strategy for network segmentation?
So there's two parts to that, and my response to your statement is finally, right? People get the segmentation. There's been a big move to the term or the concept of segmentation and microsegmentation back from NSX and what other companies are doing, but that's predominantly focused in the server. And it's important to do that, but how do you extend and deliver a segmented environment across the network? We've seen the rise of ransomware breaches, not to pick on any particular breach, but everyone knows about it. The Target breach, which was clearly an issue that segmentation could have prevented.
Right, but that's old news at this point.
That's old news.
I mean, Target is really old news.
Right, but now you have new news, and it's the same thing where they find ways and vectors into these areas that need to be protected. Where software-defined networking fits in that is, again, it's fundamental networking technology, but because it's software-based, you have much more flexibility to add new capabilities and functionality to be able to implement it at the network level. This is the point I was mentioning earlier about differentiation, how you deliver more value over other platforms. So making a wholesale change to your network to be able to implement a segmented model can require a massive system-wide end-to-end refresh. By looking at different technologies, different ways to do it, you can build an overlay layer that sits in the middle of your existing network and allows you to implement segmentation and better control that traffic. And what we've focused on is really bringing multiple values together within our environment. First and foremost, we build a network environment, a network operating system that runs in the data center or in the campus aggregation or different areas. That's our core strength. So at the first point, we are a network, but we can go in and deploy in very specialized environment, specialized capabilities, such as a segmentation overlay, security insertion, where we can deliver access to security resources and tools like firewall and IPS and other types of technology, visibility and things like that. And that is powered by the fact that it's all software-based, right? Software-defined and software-controlled.
Yeah, so, I mean, software is one aspect of this. I mean, I think, Target was kind of, you brought up Target, and I don't want to get stuck on Target. Target to me is, and I think for a lot of listeners is very, very old news at this point. I think people are more concerned with other aspects today of network segmentation, especially software-defined one, because they create inherently another set of risks that the old stuff didn't. We kind of knew the old stuff when you look at a Cisco or a Juniper or any other of the old networking solutions that are out there, I call them, the legacy kind. The legacy stuff, we knew that, we could be looking at vulnerability management and patching and significant stuff. Why does SDN make sense for security then?
It's the flexibility and the control that you get, number one, right? Think of SDN as being the enabler for the technology, how it gets implemented, how you deploy it, the automation and capabilities that you get in operating it, and the features and functions and flexibility of that. It's also the purpose aspect of the solution, the flexibility. To do a wholesale change, to implement segmentation is a massive undertaking. There are ways in which you can achieve segmentation and security improvements incrementally, right? And overlaying or leveraging your existing infrastructure. SDN is just a capability that allows you to implement that in a more efficient way, automate it and operate it, right? That's kind of, it's not a magic bullet that SDN magically gives you something that you don't have. You have to look at vendors and how they implement SDN. The traditional SDN model is very complicated, which is why you don't have massive adoption. It requires a controller. It's very limited in how you can deploy it in a single location. It requires all new hardware to communicate with that controller. The way that Pluribus implements SDN is, number one, it doesn't require a controller. It's completely distributed across the switching or the member devices, number one. Number two, it's completely distributed. So I can build a fabric that scales across multiple locations, multiple buildings. That's not possible in a simplified way in a traditional SDN model. You're leveraging the power of SDN, but it's really the incremental capabilities that become significant.
So kind of an interesting approach to that. And a lot of people are moving into the software base. I think a lot of security products have traditionally over the years have gone from kind of being hardware based to software based. And in fact, a lot of it is now SaaS based. And so more and more relation on software. And one of the big talks at RSA, that's been going on this year and for the last several months has been kind of the software supply chain. So you just talked about the implementation of SDN by, various organizations and how other people power it. How does SDN enhance my security overall from a perspective of managing my software supply chain to ensure that the lateral movements within my networks, like what we saw happen at SolarWinds or, with CodeCov and some of the other supply chains, how does open networking and the SDN concept really could be able to maybe give me an edge that maybe I wouldn't have with a traditional sense of, networking?
And so that's a really good question. And the simple answer to that, open networking will give you a more cost-effective, a lower price point to implement the solution. In the simplest of terms, that's the value open networking is going to give you. It's a more lower cost model. It doesn't mean that any open networking platform is going to give you those capabilities. It really comes down to the functionality. So comparatively, to be able to implement the segmentation, not every product can do it. Not every major platform that's deployed from your top tier vendors can do it. And in most cases, it's not implemented properly. How many customers, premises that we've got into say, oh, our network is segmented. We've got VLANs, everything's broken up, different groups. And then you go and try and reach the other VLAN that you're not supposed to access, ping over to a device there, and it's completely accessible. So it's not implemented in an effective way. Security strategies and also the separation between the network side and the security tool side, how do you ratify that if you have different operational groups that are managing that? As well as the implementation of the security policy at the network level and at the security technology level, right? Whether I'm dealing with the perimeter or the data center. So it really becomes a strategic approach. And what SDN allows you to do is enables you to implement that in a much more efficient way, in a simpler way. And I guess the way I would define it is it's not rigid. You can do it in stages and as overlays without complete wholesale replacements of your environment. Again, I use this term overlay, built as a sandwich in your existing environment to be able to apply control without having to replace things. Yeah, can I do that with standard networking type technologies? Yes, that's possible. But what open networking brings to the table is a more flexible acquisition model, a consumption model, and a lower cost point, which makes it more effective for them to implement, right? They're already dealing with limited budgets. We're spending
Right.
billions of dollars on security tools. How do you get an efficient footprint to give you the control?
Well, you said a magic word, which is implementation, right? Implementation is everything in security. How many of us have products where we're 20% implemented or 25% implementation, and we're missing out on a core use of a specific security feature within our environments? I mean, that's a problem that I think all of within itself is one of the Achilles heel challenges for many security practitioners. But you brought up something I think that's really critical here, which is achieving better network and user visibility. So that lateral movement where I've got my network segmentation, and on theory and on paper and on all the diagrams, you're not supposed to get from network A to network B, but like you just stated, a simple paint from network A to network B, and all of a sudden you're there. What are some of the steps to achieving better network and user visibility in order to be able to really enhance security?
So let me answer this way, and I'll come specifically to the visibility, observability question and where we fit, right? I think the first key is understanding that open networking, to me, I'll just kind of restate that. That's a baseline. That's a hardware issue. It's very important because fundamentally that hardware, the ASICs that are in there, are the underlying enabler to the features. Okay, so you've got to have the right hardware. But sitting on top of it at the software level, that's really where the secret sauce is and how these practitioners are going to implement what they need, right? In that sense, the thing to think about SDN is it gives you the power to do these different capabilities. So the approach we've taken is, as I mentioned earlier, we're a network. What we do at the network level is we virtualize the network into slices. Just like VMware virtualizes a server into multiple servers, right? Multiple separate application spaces that are completely isolated. We can do that in the network and isolate on that hardware multiple separate networks. So now everything is completely tenantized and separate, no reachability at the network level. I'm never going to say the word unbreachable because you and I both know what that means, right? That's going to be exploited at some point, but it's not reachable because they're physically, operationally at a control plane level, separate networks. They're sharing common infrastructure. So we can implement that segmentation across the network on a distributed basis. So segmentation is an important factor of what we do as an active network device. To the point of visibility, in the security fabric that we can build, we can go in a simple model of a network packet broker type of deployment. And most of the people joining us know what a network packet broker does, right? Network monitoring switch goes in the network, it taps different trunks, and it takes that traffic and it delivers it to your security tools. So you're going to build that visibility network anyway. And that's a critical factor for an overall security strategy and performance management strategy. We can go in a model exactly like that, give you the packet broker functionality, but because we're a physical network device, we can become active. We can use that same overlay network to segment, to secure, and even do resource sharing. So we can take firewalls and IDS and other types of products that you want to distribute outside of the exterior into the interior of the network to have better visibility, or apply it to new segments within your environment so you don't have to buy additional firewall devices or other types of technology.
Brilliant.
SDN makes it powerful. It gives you the ability to do this and program it, and the automation is what simplifies the overall model, right?
Right. And I think automation is a key to a lot of things we want to do today in security. How much can we take away from the basic of getting human interaction and getting the human interaction to focus on the more complex stuff and kind of shave off all the basic stuff that require a human interaction? I think that's really, really critical.
Right. And reduction of repetition, because coming back to a point I mentioned earlier, we build one of our very unique differentiators, and what Pluribus really built with our third generation SDN architecture is a distributed environment. And that's easily said by a lot of people, but not really done. We can deploy in a geographically distributed model with locations and deployments in literally different cities and countries that are all interconnected and function like a single network. So at an automation level, I can implement policy, I can implement segmentation and services that gets instantly deployed across 20, 30 different sites at one time with one command. And not only does that save time in the interaction, it reduces the chance of errors. One of the biggest challenges or causes of downtime and outages is misconfiguration. This allows you to configure consistently across the environment.
Brilliant. Steve, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program for this RSA special. How can people get a hold of you?
Well, they can certainly visit us at www.pluribusnetworks.com. Pluribus, just like on the dollar bill, e pluribus unum. And we certainly would love to chat with you and see if we can help you from a design perspective in meeting some of your requirements.
Perfect. Folks, Steve Shalita, VP of Marketing and Business Development over at Pluribus Networks. Thanks so much for tuning in to this RSA content. A lot more stuff going on during RSA, so you want to go and check it all out. That's it for us here. Thank you so much for watching, folks. Make sure to subscribe, make sure to tune in, and we'll be back with a lot more content later. Till then, cheers and stay cyber safe. Steve, thanks again.
Thanks, James. Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast. Make sure to subscribe.